Welcome back to Morning Cup. I am so honored and privileged today to have Peter with me. Peter is a U.S. Marine with 20 years of experience as the co-founder of A Life on Purpose, a program dedicated to connecting humanity through holistic education. He is an impactful voice in the world of personal growth. Peter has participated in programs with the U.S. military, Department of State, and has been featured in Black Prana Magazine and is an executive contributor at Brainz Magazine. Furthermore, he is passionate about practicing and teaching yoga and meditation. Thank you so much for being here today, Peter.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. What's going on?
I'm so happy to have you here today because I know your journey has been so amazing to follow. And I just really want for you to just highlight your overview of how you got here today, and then we can dive a little bit deeper of that journey.
Right. Sure. I can't pretend as if I don't know you, though, you know?
Of course.
I'm like, what's going on, Dr. Caroline?
I know.
Yeah,
we go way back.
Right. Yeah. Clubhouse, many Zoom calls, just developing a really great personal relationship, and following your journey as well has been really great. So even though you're interviewing me, it's just, I got to highlight you to some extent. Just to say, it's nice to just see the work that you're doing, expanding health overall, not just physical body or mind in combination. It's been great to follow so far.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I received that.
Of course. Now, I guess to talk about my journey a little bit, it's something that I have to get back used to because, as you know, we have our own live show, which we had you on. That was awesome as well. So I'm used to being on the other end, being exceedingly curious and asking people questions and, that's interesting, you know? So now I'm here to share. I guess how I got here, to keep it as succinct as possible, is just a measure of being associated or affiliated with the military, where although there were a lot of amazing people that I met and had some amazing experiences along the way, I kind of lost my identity to an organization that was ready and willing to give me one. And after leaving the military, or a couple of years before I left, it was just a measure of trying to capture who am I just for myself. If I'm not a Marine, then what am I? And having done that service for 20 years, that was quite a journey within itself. Just that part about who am I without this organization, without this institution, without my brothers, without being combat ready, without carrying a gun, for half the time, without traveling overseas and seeing all these interesting things with an organization. So that part of the journey just kind of helped to mold my way of thinking in a different way, which is what I bring to people now, that anyone or anything that has the capacity or ability to dictate who you are is to some extent your master. And that makes you a slave, in my opinion. That's been my experience of it. So the work now is to help to free people of that. Just not to say you shouldn't be in the military, or you shouldn't be an amazing psychologist like yourself, or like work wherever you want to work or whatever you want to do, but your identity, you need to own that. No one should own that. And so that kind of led me on that journey to find out what that means, how to experience myself for just myself, how to have joy for myself, and then to surround myself with people, places, and things that I can share that joy with, or who can accentuate that joy or that peace of mind. And so that's what kind of like what led me here now to the place that I am, to the work that I do, and to the type of human being that I like to be.
I appreciate you sharing that. And I'm just curious too, because what was that transition like? Because I know you kind of touched on it a little bit, but going from the military, spending 20 years and all your experience, to shifting and working more on that self-development and moving into more of that direction. What was that like process for you?
Right. It was exceedingly difficult, right? You've heard me speak before. And typically when people heard me speak before, when I wore the uniform every day, I had to literally convince people that I actually was a Marine. I have a great friend of mine, Brenda Warren, who was a Marine, retired, and then is a retired physician. Who, when we met, I had to show her my ID on Zoom, like for her to believe me that I was a Marine. And so pretty much I was living this life of two identities, where one extreme, I was this combat ready, exceedingly efficient, physically fit, operationally sound US Marine. But on the other side of it, I was deeply empathic, exceedingly curious, spiritually inclined, wanted to be spontaneous and explore the journey that was inside of me. And it was a constant battle, because as soon as I left base, that this is who I was. But when I had to go back the next day and not be this, and so it was a matter of slowly expressing myself in the way that I truly felt inside the entire time, or who I truly was. And so the struggle was, yes, to some extent, the external, right? I can't tell you how much fun people made of me when they found out that I practice yoga and then that I teach it. And I'm into all of these things that are just not doctrinal for war fighting, right? Because that's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. My being was surrounded by warfare. You know, my colleagues were people who celebrated and practiced warfare for a living. That's, that's our job. So to bring in that other side of the conversation, I was always met with these looks like, what the hell's wrong with this guy? But the real struggle was the struggle that happened within me, right? Because I felt like I was just jumping between these two extremes, and that was every single day I was doing that. This was not like a weekend thing. And then one day I just decided not to jump back across, meaning I didn't jump back into what it meant in other people's eyes to be a Marine. I just stood firm in who I was, and catastrophe was the outcome, but I welcomed it. And so it just kind of led me into a space of being not necessarily avoiding the conflict, but sometimes seeking it out and becoming what I call like a part of my training with my clients is about being comfortably uncomfortable, getting comfortable with discomfort. And I know I do quite a bit of reading in the psychological spheres and periodicals. So I know you teach that as well, and you studied it about what that means to build resilience. And so really that was really the outcome on the other side of all of that nuance of not just being made fun of, having problems even with my military career, because I was no longer trapped by the identity that someone else gave me. I was now fostering an identity that I was establishing based on values that I was choosing for myself. So that was kind of like some of the nuance of how that worked, what happened in there.
I appreciate you bringing that up, because I think a lot of people, maybe not in that exact way, but struggle with like what they do versus who they are, and being able to merge that. And I love that you just stood very tall and being able to not jump back across and just being like, this is me, and like following what made sense for you, your values to a core. And no matter what the outside noise was saying or the external factors, but just really being grounded. And I love that you were able to kind of shift that mindset for yourself and be able to move forward with that. And as you move forward with that, because I know there's been a lot from that point to a life on purpose, because just what I'm hearing too, it's like you were living that life on purpose. You were showing up for how you wanted to live your life and not allowing other people to dictate that, essentially. And so what was that journey like for you once you started really just standing in your power of like, this is who I am, this is me, unconditionally, but how did you get from there to a life on purpose?
I had honestly like a lot of tragedy happen, but I also had a lot of hope.
Yeah.
So I must give credit to both sides of it. And I think they were both very necessary. It seems to me that in not all cases, but in the vast majority of cases, a person seeks out a higher level of self and consciousness because of a catalyst from catastrophe.
Right.
I think it's a very unfortunate thing about our species, to be honest. I wish that it were different in my case and in my clients' cases, but it seems to be an absolute necessity for most of us. We have to have someone die, or we have to lose everything in, like a financial crisis, or we have to face some type of, external tribulation or oppression. And then we rise up to the challenge, like what's happening now with our climate, right?
Yeah.
It took people to be baking under the sun, extreme drought, weather conditions, an entire city worth of ice broke off into the ocean. And then we want to now address the climate, right? Couldn't have done it before. That was impossible. So the same thing happened to me. So I'm not excluded from that, that catastrophic premise that is necessary somehow for growth. And that's really what that was. So my journey started out with really the birth of my first son, Jaden. So really before he was born, I had no real interest in discovering this other aspect of life just beyond my job as a Marine, making money, chasing pretty girls, driving an expensive car, the regular stuff, the stuff that everyone tells you need to be successful.
Right.
But really, it was after his birth that I realized that I didn't want my son to become me. And that really bothered me as a father, because it just led me to asking the right questions. Like, for one, why would me as a father not want my son to become me?
Yeah.
Well, that's because I was a terrible person, right? I looked at women as sexual objects. That was the truth.
Yeah.
And if I wanted him to treat women better, then I needed to be better. Because I can tell him all day long, but it's what he sees and who I am that's going to determine the man he becomes. So I had to change that. I wasn't necessarily the type of person that would be interested in scholarship other than warfare. And if I wanted him to become a scholar, then I had to become one. So like, damn, now I got to read books. So I started to, right, exactly. So I started to do that. And so all of these little things that I started to do in my life to become a better father, it actually made me realize that I needed to grow into something else just for me. So in the beginning, it didn't start off like I just wanted to be better. I just wanted to be a better dad. I wanted to be a better example. I wanted to be a hero for my kid. I never really had that myself. And so I wanted to give that to him through me. And so I wanted to become all those things that I wish I had. And so I just started to get into courses, and the platform Mind Valley really, really helped me along that journey, because just things were just accessible there. And I ran into a course of theirs called Silver Ultra Mind from Jose Silva. And it's a really nuanced type thing to talk about, but I really felt like something in me was unlocked during that time of my journey there with Mind Valley, which I'm still a part of their organization. I'm still a member. I'm still a student with them. But my journey also was simultaneous with yoga and meditation. So these were two separate journeys. One was with yoga and meditation. And I think that what happened there is I was exceedingly receptive. So because of the spiritual practices that I was doing, once I started to look at it also from the academic perspective, I started to do that journey now with also my mind and my intellect, because I was softening my gaze quite a bit, because I was focusing on my breathing, because my physical body was starting to loosen, which impacted the chemical receptors in my body, which gave me, heightened states of emotional connection. Once I started to take those courses, I started to receive a little bit more depth, because everybody can read the book, right? But can you apply what you have learned?
Right.
And so that's what I think the combination was of my spiritual practice and then finding Mind Valley, that connection was exceedingly powerful. And so once I started to really jump into the application process, which was the last, I'd say like 2 years of my military career, that's how I started to design what I would like to do afterwards and kind of discover within those nuances of ups and downs, designing a company, finding out what it means to manage civilians, not Marines, which is such a different, aspect. That's how really that journey began. I would say definitely crediting Mind Valley, but also my own work in my capacity to be receptive.
Mhm. I love that. And I want to go back to what you said too about just when you had that pivotal moment of being able, kind of like sometimes life blows up at us
Right,
and we have to
right.
make these changes. And I think so many people do, their back is against the wall and they're like, this is the only way out. Like I have to do
Right.
something different. And I think a lot of people can relate to that. And I'm glad you brought that up because I do think it is something that might not be normalized where you are going through something. Of course, we want to do something proactively, but that's not
Right.
always the case. That would be a lot
Right.
easier. By all means, but I love that you were able to take that and apply it in a different way and really asking yourself those deeper questions of, okay, well, for your son to, you didn't want your son to be like you at that point, and you started making, it started with your son, but then really developing for yourself too, and really applying
Right.
this knowledge and making these changes and understanding the power of meditation and yoga, and then also doing your own research and reading articles. I know you read so much as well.
Right.
Which is so valuable, but it's, you apply it because so many people can absorb all this knowledge, but it's how you be able to apply it to your everyday life and being able to understand those nuances and keeping going with that pattern and of changing previous patterns to making
Right.
behaviors and being able to recognize that, because a lot of times people might not recognize it, but being able to recognize it and then doing something about it and creating a beautiful life you have now as well. And even then, but being able to move into fatherhood, since we started talking about that, I know
Right.
you just had your second son, but how have you
Right.
been able to really integrate work and life and really merge the two together in a way that works for you? Because I know everyone's a little bit different.
Right. Yeah, it's all connected for me, as far as like where my story began and really where I am now, just kind of building like upon that, because I find that the same fundamental principles apply no matter what situation I look at.
Yeah.
So, becoming a father for the second time, I started to think about that, like what were some of the things that I used to do that I was like, man, I definitely want to do something a little bit different. Or what were some of the things that worked exceedingly well? It's like, how can I not only do more of that, but now build upon that and become more, more exceedingly efficient at being a parent or things of that nature. Because there's still the Marine in me, I still look at things somehow structured. I'm just laughing because Lena's gonna watch this and laugh probably. Because I can't help it, there's just some things that are just there. I just look at things from an operational standpoint, like, okay, this is a kid. How do we get?
I'll be honest with you.
Right, but I do have a softer side of me as well that Lena's really, really helping me with. I think that what's helped me balance to a large extent is what I was talking about in the beginning, by not letting anything determine who I decide to be or how I show up. So I have my days just like every other human being where I am not necessarily my best self, right? Where I may stay up working a little bit too late than I should. I typically don't drink coffee. So when I do, it gets me a little bit like more hyper right? Because I try not to drink it as much. Or, I may not have been hydrated that day as much, or I may have had to skip my practice or something. But the underlying thing behind all of this is a knowing that fundamentally I am responsible for my actions or my response to the external. That's my fundamental thing. So, like we were talking about before, and I was messaging you about why I couldn't make it before. Like, my son was sick, and just because we took him to the doctor to get his shots, which is I find that so interesting because it's the only time he gets sick when when we take him to the doctor, right? Because he gets a fever from the vaccines or whatever he gets. And I could have probably still made my client calls that I had scheduled. I could have probably still have paid more attention to my schedule and made this interview then, but I decided to prioritize being a father first.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's just a matter of the decision to do that was made before he was born. So all of these things that are happening, I'm actually not even really, pondering whether or not this is a hard thing to do or something like that, because I spend so much time doing that work every single day that when the situation comes up, it's really not a choice.
Yeah.
It's really not a choice because my values are set as far as I am going to be the best father that I can possibly be, which means that the best version of myself needs to show up every single day. That's just fundamental, right? And if that means I gotta miss a meeting, then I guess I miss it. If that means that I gotta miss an opportunity to make some money, I guess I missed it, because fundamentally, I believe very firmly that the predetermining factor of my child being an exceedingly amazing human being in this world is not going to be by how much money I make. It's going to be by the example that I set for him. And so that's what I mean by how I maintain that type of balance is choosing values that are aligned with the outcome that I want to see in the future. Yeah. Not the values that have been set to me by a predetermined socioeconomic condition that says this is what you need to have success be defined by us. I own that for myself. So my child is exposed to a household where spirituality, spiritual practice, being prayerful, loving, speaking to each other with dignity, having empathy for each other, that this is what we foster in our household. And even if we're not necessarily, or me personally, because Lena's perfect, it's just me. Even if I'm not necessarily my best self all the time, I know that my max effort is always there. And so I sleep very comfortably with that. And I have a lot of empathy for myself as well, which is why I can have empathy for other people, because I think that there's a direct correlation to that, right? Like digging into the psychology now, if you can't have empathy for yourself, it's really difficult to have empathy for others. So when you see people being unempathetic, you can only imagine what they do to themselves internally. So that's kind of how I guess I navigate that space, is to use a lot of journaling. Actually, that helps quite a bit to establish and direct my intentions, so that I can not necessarily override, but guide my subconscious mind to, move in the direction that is fitting with the future that I want to see.
I'm just really just soaking in that, because you said so many amazing things there, but the most important, I think, is just going back to your priorities. Like, it wasn't even like a thought about certain things, because you already made that decision, like with your son, of, okay, priorities. And I think it's so important to recognize that when we have our values set, it's non-negotiable. And it like, meetings are going to happen, opportunities are going to happen. But at the end of the day, you are setting that example for your son. You don't even have to say anything. You are just showing up as that person, and they are going to subconsciously see that. So it's, a lot of times people are like, oh, well, I have this and that and all the external things and materialistic things. But really, I love that you brought up the empathy and how sometimes it can be so hard for us to give empathy to others if we aren't taking care of ourselves first and foremost. And I think that's so key to just the human connection and the connection with ourselves first and foremost. But all the work that you've done, it's played out as you've gone through the day to day. And it's just those behaviors. It's the natural instinct, because it goes exactly with how you value life and the things around you as well that matter to you. And I'm curious because just outside of being a father, also being a partner. And I know you work with Lena as well. Beautiful soul, both of you are. But how has that been working together? Because sometimes it can be challenging, sometimes it's great. But what has been your experience working with your partner?
Right. I'm going to sound like a broken record here, but it's the same principles.
Yeah.
So for one, I think that it's a bit challenging when you have these platforms that have so much power, like social media, right? Like Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, whatever you want to use, because it's no way to give you the inside, in-depth view of a person's life. Because when I'm not my best self, I'm not going to post that on Instagram. It's just, who does that, right? Might be a few people who do that, but I honestly don't. And it's not necessarily because I don't want to be authentic. It's because it's none of your business or how I live my life every day. It's just you see what I want you to see.
Right.
So I say that because, for example, us working together through those challenges is a way of, we do that purposefully to inject, to some extent, a state of discomfort into our life on purpose.
Yes.
Right? That is done intentionally because it's so challenging. But just like when you go through shared hardship as a Marine, one of the things that we do when we train young recruits, things of that nature, we put them into shared hardships together. We make them walk hundreds of miles, Dr. Iscovitz, right? Hundreds of miles in boots with a 65-pound pack, a helmet, a vest that weighs 45 pounds, and a weapon in their hand, right? And we make them walk up mountains and crawl through all types of nastiness and sleep outside in the cold, and it's so cold. And we make them go through, and we do all these things, not for punishment, but that's what happens on the other end of that shared hardship is a person that will stand in front of a bullet for you. So it's a process.
Yeah.
So you look at one end and you say, oh my goodness, Marines are amazing, but I don't want to do all of that on the other side. That's the way to get there. So the way for us to have a lifelong friendship, a lifelong partnership that is built on trust, that is not built on ownership, that is built on a mutual respect, that is not built on provision, like what I can give you, that is built on not necessarily justice, but equity. Because in my mind, justice means you need a higher authority. Equity means we can figure that out together. Right? So in order for us to do that, we have to inject shared hardships into our lives purposefully. And the reason why I want to do it purposefully is because it's going to happen anyway. No matter what I do in this life, a member of my family will die. The US dollar might fail. There might be a civil war somewhere. Russia may invade a country. Gas prices may. There's nothing I can do, right? There's nothing I can do about that. So if I were to really think about this and spend some time really thinking about it, there are some things in this life that have nothing to do with me, but they will impact my life, right? And so I don't necessarily want to wait 5-6 years for that to happen. I want to inject a little bit of it every single day, right? So I can really get strong, right? If I'm training for the Olympics, right? I don't want to wait till the Olympics to try to bench press 225 pounds or whatever it is that I'm doing. That's ridiculous, right? I'm going to train every single day, and I'm going to take a proactive approach to it. But I'm doing that now emotionally. I'm doing that now psychologically. I'm doing that type of work that no one credits you for, the stuff behind the scenes. You know, the changing the diapers and the doing the laundry and, you know, standing there and let the baby puke on you so Lena can get a little bit of sleep. But, you know, these type of things is what's missing from social media that you'll never see, right? Yeah. And because we spend a lot of time working on that and injecting, working together in a business, that's unavoidable, right? So we do it purposefully. So that on the other side of it, though, there's a bond that's created in our relationship that goes beyond, you know, the superficial. Yeah. And so that's really how I think working together in our business, developing things together, creating courses together, working on content, things of that nature, has really helped to foster just something really magical. And it's done by using military tactics.
They never go away.
No.
Oh, I appreciate that so much. No, but you know, it's so interesting too, because you mentioned it about that foundational piece. It's the building that muscle. So like, for instance, right. What you were saying too, it's just like when you go to the gym or working out, or even with the military or the Marines, like that example of how you had everybody walking 100 miles with the backpacks and sleeping in the cold. I would never survive. But with that being said, it's that muscle that you're building. And I love that you have such a beautiful journey with that, and understanding it's those baby steps of every time you're right. doing something, it's putting yourself in that situation to work through it, not against it. And I think that's where a lot of times with relationships too, it's being able to work together and understanding there's a common goal. It's you versus the situation. And I think that's like what I'm hearing, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's really looking at it as we're in this together, we're equals, we're being able to build upon it versus just trying to go from 0 to 100, but really taking those everyday steps to get to the ultimate goal and then continuing on as well and building upon that. I love how you phrased it though.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, I'm not saying all of this because I'm some, you know, unicorn that's just figured out life, right? The tragedy I spoke of before was, like I said, I was not like this before. Mm-hmm. I told you how I looked at women. I chose my partnerships based on, you know, how extravagant I thought someone was physically attractive. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that was appropriate. And I don't think that I had really good examples, to be perfectly honest. I'm not taking any blame for myself, but I don't think that an example was set for me as an alternative. Yeah. When I looked at the screen, when I looked at movies, when I looked at men in my life and how they treated women, when I looked at the different so-called mentors that were around me, that's exactly what they did. So yeah. I was just following this pattern. Right. And so to make that shift, it really took a lot of negative things that happened in my life. So actually, when I left to Saudi Arabia in 2017, that's when my wife at the time decided to leave. And she took my son, which they're still in Germany at the moment. So I'm not even around my firstborn. And so I had that great tragedy as a catalyst for change. Mm-hmm. So now I have something to look at to say, I never want this to happen again. I never want this type of condition to happen. So what were the different things that were there? So I had to take a look at myself, and I spent quite a bit of time in both physical and emotional isolation to let that happen. Because for me, that was necessary for me. I'm not sure if everyone needs to do that, but I really cut myself off from the world for an extensive period of time. I say about 4.5 years, I went through this process after my wife left to try to figure out how that happened, because I had every single box checked that I was told that I needed to be successful, but I was completely miserable. Multiple homes purchased, using the equity to invest in, additional properties, potentially buying a hotel and blah, blah, blah. Check box, right? Had the trophy wife, check box, the cat, the 2 cars, the blah, 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 the flourishing career. Every box that I was, as an example that I saw, I checked it, but it still failed.
Mm-hmm.
So at the end of that, I came to the conclusion that it must be me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I came out of that period of isolation with a couple of really deep insights that I previously was, currently am, and will be the only thing in the way of my success. Because the women were all different, the situations were all different, the opportunities were all different, but the result was the same. So the only thing there that was constant was me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it was it wasn't like I found it as some type of amazing thing that I discovered. It's just that, man, I was so stupid.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I really looked at it. I don't feel it as some type of great achievement because I saw the thing that was always there, but I just didn't have the receptivity to see it.
Mm-hmm.
Because along the way, I started to notice people were trying to tell me, you know, but I couldn't hear them. I read the books, but I didn't get the message.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So these are the things now that I pay attention to, or I give great credit to that time just for insight, because now I know what's good for me because I've done the work there. You know, now I know that I need to surround myself with people who are, you know, I talk about this empathy quite a bit because it's really healthy for me to be around people like that. But I'm around people who are a little bit too aggressive, a little bit too, you know, too much into warfare. To be honest, I start to take on those attributes just by being around them. And I started to do the research and I found out that there's such a thing as mirror neurons, right? You just by being around people, you start to take on their stuff. And I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. Why didn't anyone tell me about this? I had no clue.
Right.
You know, so these are things that I discovered along the way that kind of just molded my way of thinking or helped me to now establish like, okay, I need to have a value of, for example, spiritual connection. I need to have that as a really high value because that helps my best self to show up every single time. So that's kind of how I step into that. And now when it comes to my partnership with Lena, which is the crux of what we're discussing, now I need to find someone who can walk these values with me, the fundamental ones. Because, for example, if I'm in a partnership with someone that doesn't have spirituality as a high value, that's just not going to work because that's like one of my highest values. And if it's not shared in a lifestyle type thing, if they want to go out to the club and I want to go meditate, it's not going to work. Not anything wrong with going to the club, but we just need to have shared values.
No, I appreciate you bringing that up too, because, you know, I think especially with relationships, it is having those core values be the same.
Right.
You can have different types of views on things and it might clash. And just like the example you gave, meditation versus going to a club, either one are no issues with either. However, might be a little different energetically.
Right.
Unless it's like a meditation club. But then you're okay.
If you find it, send it to me.
But you know, it's true though. I think it goes back to just really being able to honor yourself and respecting yourself and recognizing too when you're ready to receive that information, because you were ready at that point where you hit that isolation period of really tuning into what you needed back a few years ago and being able to be aligned with that and live that life, and finding somebody who does match that so perfectly together and have that lifestyle that makes sense for you and makes sense for Lena as well, but being able to come together and work through all of that, but also just understanding each other and having those open hearts where it does align perfectly. Because I think that's a big part of it. But I want to know, because I know you've given us a lot of life lessons, but what are some tips or things that you wish you would have known in the beginning of your entrepreneurial journey that you know now?
That is a very good question, but it's I have kind of a nuanced response. For example, blind spots that I had along the way where, you know, someone tried to cheat me out of some finances because of a contractual thing that I didn't understand, right? Whether that be I missed an opportunity because I didn't know how to close a deal. Whether that be someone stealing an idea that I had and bringing it to their organization and starting it on their own. Like these are all real stories I'm I'm telling you about, right?
Yeah.
All of those things, if you remove any of them, the present moment would be different. So, but while I appreciate the question, I think that you have to have an appreciation to some extent for the things that happen to you in your life that you may consider bad or you may consider unfortunate, because it's all energy.
Right.
And so that's how I try to reframe these things and to say it's not necessarily that I feel like there are things that I should have known before, even though I sometimes feel that, like, psychologically or in my mind, but I have some fundamental things that I do, whether through my journaling, my spiritual practice. I constantly read about these different concepts. Everything that I come up to has led me to understand that there is just something very intangible about the present moment that we constantly miss. And because it's so fragile, it moves so softly. Even this conversation we're having right now, it's so delicate that it's such a knife edge in what I say or what I don't say, that I use the past to determine what my future will look like. And because I use the past with what my future will look like, well, then my identity is based on an illusion, because the past is no more, only the present exists, right? And so because I'm making these decisions about my future based on my past, which is an illusion, I can't make accurate predictions about the future.
Right.
And if I can't make accurate predictions about the future, how can I step in a direction that is fundamentally aligned with what I want to see? It's impossible. So I went through that whole nuance of that to say that even though there are things that somehow the human side of me still wish I knew about those contracts, or I wish I knew not to tell that guy about that idea, but to go to directly to his boss who I knew, right? I just wanted to go through these different levels of conversations. I would say that I must not use that as a way of determining what to do in the future. I must use the present moment, because the present moment is the only thing that exists, and the present moment is the only thing that will help me to make decisions in the future of where I want to be. The past will never do that for me. Only here now. And so what I do is I try to just have a real deep appreciation for where I am now. What's going on in my business that I can look at that could be even considered as a failure, but appreciate that. And there's a fundamental reason why I do that, and I could kind of get into it a little bit deeper if that's okay.
Yeah, please.
It's because, as I understand it, we live in a reality that is binary, and you can't escape this binary system. What I mean by that is you can't understand up unless you know down. You can't understand this instead of that. I can't know me if I don't know you. It's impossible. So, for example, when tragedy occurs, if you can have the right perspective and look at it from the right angle, you can actually see potential, because you can't know potential without tragedy, right? And so this is what I do. When I look at these things in the past that you asked me about that I wish I knew, I look at them, say, what's the lesson there? What did this person really teach me by taking advantage of my ignorance? What did this outburst teach me about the growth that I still need to have internally? And so that's kind of how I address those things about learning from the past and bringing it into the future. But I bring that to the present moment so I can look at it with the right perspective. Because if I don't do that, I will say it's not a good idea for me to commit myself to a partnership because my last partner left me and did this or that. It's not a good idea for me to make close bonds with people because this person took advantage of me, because that was the past. And so that's why I try to bring it to this moment, apply the right perspective, and so that I can step into the future in the direction where I want to go.
So beautifully said. And I love how you reframe that too, because it is about understanding where you are in the present moment. Of course, like the lessons learned. So past mistakes don't happen again, of course, like in that capacity. But I love that you bridged it together of really looking at it from a clear perspective, because everyone we come in contact with, for instance, the example you gave me, the one that stole the idea, not everyone is like that person, but like recognizing that, you know, and I think that's such a key element to it, of understanding the perspective and the situation is going to be different moving forward. And you can't judge something based off of the past. You can definitely bring in that energy and the understanding of what the lesson was, because I think lessons are so powerful, especially if we can learn it on the first time. That's
the goal,
I've had to learn a couple lessons too many times.
Right.
But I just wanted to say, I think you outlined it so beautifully. So I appreciate you bringing that into the space today as well. And I have one more question in regards to just clients, because I know you've worked with so many people, you've helped so many people. What has been maybe one or two of your client success stories that you could share with us today?
I'll share two perspectives on that, if that's okay. Like, first perspective, I've had clients come to me that were mirroring a lot of the attributes that I exhibited in the past, which were just not having faith in human potential anymore to bring them anything positive into their lives. And it made me very sad to see it, but I was happy to be a part of their growth, because I know what that feels like, especially after you've been hurt very bad by a person that just makes you want to quit on humanity, right? I don't know if it's just me that's been in that situation, but you know, like, some things can happen to you that are so tragic that you kind of want to give up on in faith or hope in people. And guiding through those principles, I think it was very interesting to see how me understanding the depths of myself helped me to understand really the complexities of others. Because, for example, if I can get a really intimate understanding of the extremes of my own thinking, I can also have empathy for a person who has an extremist ideal. Because I know that to some extent that's in me. And if I can understand the depths that I can go to be loving, empathic, playful, relational with others, I can know that that depth or that controversy also exists on the other extreme of that person. So it kind of gets you to look at people in a different way, even though they may act in a way that is not in accordance with their best self. It doesn't necessarily mean that they don't have their best potential inside of them. And that's what I get to see when I work with clients, and I love to see that transformation where that starts to unfold. But I also have a client fail that I'd like to share.
Oh, please.
Like I said, this binary system, I think it would be unfair to present myself as some type of healer where I touch you and you're good. That's not been my story, right? I've had, and there's a reason I'm sharing this story. I had a client that was working with me, and the client detached themselves from our program before we were finished going through a process. And I understand why the client felt like they were good now, they can handle whatever they wanted to, but I knew that there were so many layers, because I went through these layers, and you know where the evil eye hides when you say, oh, I'm good, I don't have anger anymore. It's there, right?
Oh, yes.
Right? And so this is what happened. The client left the program, and then I called my clients back, or my previous clients, just to check on them, and the client is in the hospital. So coming from, a psychological trauma, that they had previously experienced. And because they weren't doing the program that I had aligned for them, they just kind of slip back into their old ways. So I guess an advice, if you're going through a coaching program, if you're getting a psychological evaluation, if you're seeking a therapist, man, go through your program. You know, like do the work, because the person behind that designing it, they're designing it for a reason, for a purpose. I'm sure that, for example, you know, Caroline, she has her program set out in a specific way. There's a lot of research or something that went into that. And if you skip steps and you try to jump around on your own, you may end up in catastrophe. So that actually happened to me, and I never forgot that. That was probably like a year ago, and it still bothers me. But there's nothing I could do. I can't like fight someone to finish their program. But I guess it's something to share if someone's listening. To say that was a client failed for. I consider that a fail for me, but there was actually nothing I could do because it's both sides.
I appreciate you sharing both like the sides of it, but you're right. Like if people don't follow like the steps, it could just blow up essentially and not be able to handle it in an accurate way where it's going to be a safe place to do that and move forward with. But I appreciate you sharing both stories because it just, again, it goes back to being human, and not every client's going to have success, but it's a partnership, especially when you're working with someone. You do the work, but they have to do the work too. It's not just one-sided. But thank you for sharing those. I appreciate it. And I've been enjoying this conversation immensely, Peter, but we're going to jump into the rapid fire questions if you're ready.
Okay. Sure.
The first question is, who is your hero?
Who's my hero? I would say Lena.
Oh, she's pretty amazing.
Right.
So what motivates you to work smarter?
What motivates me to work smarter is accredited to all the mistakes that I've made in life so far. Those are my biggest helpers, and all the people that have taken advantage of me, they're my biggest mentors in life.
I love that. And so if you were a superhero, what would be your power or powers?
If I were a superhero, my power would be to have the highest capacity for receptivity. Because I think that if you are receptive, when a person walks into the room, you can know this is a person I want to do business with, or this is a person who I should avoid. When a person comes into your life who is a potential partnership, you can look at them and say, I should get really close to this person, and in what capacity, or I should avoid them at all costs. So I think that for telling the future or jumping into the past, the practicality of it is nuanced, right? Depending on the progress in string theory or whatever you scientists come up with, right? But what I mean practically for a human being, you can really enhance your receptivity, and that would be that's a superpower that I'm working on every single day, is to enhance my receptivity so I can make the right decisions.
I love that. I haven't heard that one before. I like how you put it. I wish I could just like grant all these superpowers, but you're working on it. So eventually you're going to have it. So if you were to share a meal with any 4 individuals, living or dead, who would they be?
Oh, wow. Neil deGrasse Tyson, who's an astrophysicist. I love that guy. Oprah. I mean, if you don't have Oprah there, you know, what are you talking about? I'm a big fan of Dr. Martin Luther King because I have a lot of questions that I don't think he answered. And another one would be Alan Watts. He's my favorite author, philosopher, and just amazing intellectual.
Oh, that's a powerful table right there.
Right.
So what is the most daring thing you've ever done?
The most daring thing I've ever done is to choose to follow my heart and let my intellect follow suit.
It's pretty daring.
Right.
It's working out though. So what is the phone app that you use the most?
Phone app that I use the most? I would say would be Blinkist. It's I don't know if you're familiar with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you can read books really fast, and so sometimes there are, for example, a book from like Brian Greene or you know Neil deGrasse Tyson on astrophysics, or if I want to learn about entropy or thermodynamics, that's going to take me quite a bit of time to read through those novels, right? But you can go through Blinkist and get through quite a bit, get the concepts, and if you're receptive enough, you will know what you need to dig a little bit more into, what to kind of, you can bypass a couple of chapters. So yeah, that's what I use the most.
That's a good one. I need to catch up on that one. So speaking of reading, what is the last book that you've read or listened to?
Right. So I'm currently reading The Mosaic by Daniel Levin. You probably know him from Clubhouse.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an amazing read. Beautiful storyteller. And the one before that was The Way of Zen by Alan Watts.
Great choices. So if you were to have a movie about your life thus far, who would play you?
Who would play me? My ego says Dwayne Johnson, because that's how I see myself.
Of course.
But it's more, I would say Jim Carrey would be the perfect actor. Not because of what I saw from him on stage, but what I've heard him say off stage about reality, understanding the self. And he said something I think is exceedingly powerful, that he wished that everyone would get everything that they desired in the physical world, so that they can see that that's not what matters in life. I mean, how do you go past that?
Yeah. No, I've heard him speak off like videos and just other things.
Right.
He was incredible man.
Right.
I can see him playing you. So what is your favorite family recipe, whether it's a traditional one or you just love making it together?
Family recipe. I'll say Lena makes these really incredible soups from Latvia, and we don't make it together because of not just because of the baby. I think we do some things really well, and it's not like to say a negative dependency. It's like interdependence. It's like she cooks really well. I'm a really great planner. So let let the cooks cook, let the planners plan. But yeah, I really enjoy her meals. But I really enjoy anytime she makes anything traditionally Latvian, because it's so far out of the spectrum of what I've experienced that it's always something interesting.
Well, it sounds good.
Right.
And so if you had to describe yourself as an animal, personality type, style, what animal would you be?
Personality type, style, I would honestly say a snake. Because there's something about a snake that is essentially described as evil because of the Bible, for the most part. But the snake's receptivity, which goes back, I thought about this for quite some time, is quite renowned, where they can feel vibrations, some of them from like miles away. They can taste the air with their tongue and understand what's going on. Like, that's what I mean by like receptivity. I'm fascinated with it,
Yeah, I like that response. I haven't heard snake yet, but I could see that the way you described it. So when you have a day off, I know work-life integration is big for you, but what is your favorite way to spend that day off?
Right. So Lena and I have a day every single week where we just focus on family time, spirituality, like our top values are focused on in that day. And during that time, I would say that half of the time I really enjoy just spending working on our relationships in a purposeful way, not just having a conversation, like writing things down, like, hey, we want to work through either this problem, or we want to connect more in this area, or we want to design a spiritual practice together. These are some of the things that we've actually done. And then the other time, I would say that my best self is presented when I'm just left by myself. I just focus on my practice, or I just sit in silence for quite some time, and just connect with myself, connect with my body, connect with my breath. Just because of that understanding of the duality of nature, right? If I want to be exceedingly productive, if I want to be proactive, if I want to create things in the world, something on the other side of that must be absent, because the doing must be paired with the non-doing.
Right.
So I spend quite a bit of time in the non-doing state so that I can just do and be exceedingly productive.
Well put. And what is something an outsider wouldn't know about your industry?
Right. Oh, something someone wouldn't know about. About my industry. So it's a very interesting connection to the story we've been telling this whole time. After my son was born in 2013, I started to seek out this aspect of meditation, and everything and everyone in my life resisted it. My ex-wife, her family, Marines, my family, everybody made fun of me. And this was 2013, you couldn't talk about meditation in 2013, right? Unless you were wearing a robe and you lived in the Himalayas. But I stuck with it. And as of November, I would have created meditations for different organizations to make that aspect of my business the largest financially producing sector.
Just goes to show, don't give up on what you know is good for you.
Right.
Oh my God, that's incredible. Just the transformation of that as well, and not really listening to, again, what we were talking about earlier of the outside noise or external factors, but just trusting within what made sense. And I'm so glad to hear that, because I'm sure, and I know you're changing so many lives with how many meditations that are out there that you have facilitated, but also helping just your clients and organizations as well.
I appreciate that.
Of course. So Peter, where can people find you, use your services? We're going to link everything below, but if you could let us know too.
Sure. I'm on Instagram for the most part. I'm not a fan of really jumping into too many different things at once. So I'm there, peter.m.lucas, or you can find me at alifeonpurpose.com. Really, I'm always fascinated by hearing what people say, either when they interact with my content, or if they find me somehow doing an interview or something. So I'm very open just to like direct communication.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Peter, for coming on today, sharing your beautiful energy and light with us, and all the lessons that I'm sure so many people are going to really resonate with as well and learn from. So I appreciate just your time, your energy, and coming on today.
Sure, my pleasure. There's a fundamental message of mine, and I guess I'd be remiss if I didn't say it, that you don't need to be improved. All that you need is already within you. Much love.
Thank you so much. Make sure to like, subscribe, comment below. What was the biggest takeaway from Peter? I'm sure he would love to see that comment. Definitely reach out to him directly as well, and we'll see you on the next video.